Hello, so today we're going to be discussing the Battle of Pharsalus. Before we begin the battle, let's go over what happened to lead up to the battle. So, first off, Caesar was fighting up here in Gaul, and he did what nobody in Rome has ever been able to do. He defeated Gaul and conquered the area. A bunch of the senators in Rome did not like what he was doing up there in Gaul, so they pretty much ordered him to return to Rome to stand trial. As he came into Rome, he came across a river right about here, which is known as the Rubicon. The problem is no Roman general was ever allowed to cross the Rubicon River with a standing army. It was illegal. In doing so would initiate civil war. Well, Caesar decided to do it anyways and started to march on Rome. The leading military general that was in Rome at the time was Pompey. So Pompey had the backing of all of the Senate. They felt that he was going to win, to be able to beat Caesar. However, Pompey did not have an army in Rome because, well, it's illegal to have an army in Rome. So Pompey left and went east to try to raise an army. So Caesar moved into Rome. He took over Rome for a little while and realized that he needed to do something about Pompey and to try to get the senators back. So he started off by first going to Spain and fighting all of Pompey's generals that were in Spain. He pretty much defeated all of them, and the ones that he wasn't able to defeat were able to escape and meet Pompey in Greece. So then Caesar goes back to Rome. He's in Brundisium, and he decides to sail across into Greece. He goes right about here to a small town called Apollonia. From there, he realized that he needed to get to Dyrrhachium because Dyrrhachium is where all the supplies were, and whoever had control of Dyrrhachium had control of the supplies. However, Pompey was able to get to Dyrrhachium first, and there was a battle that happened right about that area there. Caesar ends up losing that battle, and he escapes going south. As he's moving south, all of Pompey's lieutenants were telling Caesar that they needed to go after him and finish him while they had the advantage. But Pompey felt very confident and felt that he didn't really need to go after him. He could just wait and conquer Caesar at his leisure. Pompey didn't realize is that by not listening to his lieutenants and going after Caesar, he forfeited the momentum. Caesar was able to rally his troops. He was able to build the momentum. He was able to build their morale, and they marched to a small area right here in Pharsalus. And as they arrived at Pharsalus, Caesar was in the plains below the base of the mountain, and Pompey established his camp on top of the mountain. And that leads us to the battle.
So this is the battlefield that was set up. Here to the north is Pompey's camp. This mountain would have extended all the way across, so we put forest to signify that it's the rest of the mountain. To the west is the river, with Pompey's army set up just at the base of the mountain. Across to the south is Caesar's army and Caesar's camp to his south. Pompey's infantry was 45,000 strong with 7,000 cavalry. Pompey was located in this location right about here. Caesar's army had 22,000 infantry with only 1,000 cavalry. Caesar decided to place a unit of pikemen at an oblique behind that far right rank. This was to set up an ambush for Pompey's cavalry. As the battle began, Caesar ordered his infantry to charge, but to halt halfway on the battlefield. At the same time, Caesar's cavalry was ordered to charge and attack Pompey's cavalry. Pompey ordered his infantry to stand fast and hold their ground because he knew that as a unit charges, that they would break their lines and they would be able to pick off Caesar's infantrymen one at a time. Once the cavalry battle was going on, the rest of Caesar's infantry charged into the front lines of Pompey's infantry. This was to allow Pompey to believe that that's where the main battle was taking place. Meanwhile, Caesar's cavalry was ordered to flee back to lead them into the ambush. As Caesar's cavalry was fleeing back, there was a lot of dust, and Pompey's cavalry did not see the pikemen that were posted up for the ambush. Caesar had given his pikemen direct orders to aim for the faces of Pompey's cavalry because Romans did not like to have disfigured faces if they were to survive the battle. What remained of Pompey's cavalry started to flee at this point because they realized that they were about to be defeated. And of course, the pikemen and Caesar's cavalry, as well as Caesar himself, followed in chase. Caesar's pikemen and cavalry were then able to take Pompey's left flank. Pompey started to realize what was happening and decided that he was going to flee at this time. With Pompey's army being trapped between the river and the mountain and the enclosing of Caesar's army, they realized that they were in a pretty bad position. At this point, Caesar noticed that Pompey was no longer on the battlefield, and he slipped away unnoticed. At this point, Pompey's army was almost all but defeated. Caesar's army had Pompey's army completely surrounded with what was remaining. A lot of them decided to retreat back to Pompey's camp. However, Caesar and a small unit followed after. And finally, Caesar and his army was able to get into Pompey's camp where all the senators were hiding. They decided to either kill the ones that Caesar would not favor Caesar, or capture the ones that would favor Caesar.
So that was what actually happened on the Battle of Pharsalus. So then me and Brian Campbell in this picture decided to play the game of Hail Caesar to see if it actually turns out similar to what happened in real life. Unfortunately for us, the video was lost, and I was able to get pictures of all of it. So luckily, I can run you through what happened with the pictures. And I'd like to thank Brian Campbell because he is the owner of the game who assisted me with this project. So while playing this, you're going to see some and this is a quick little guide to let you see what each of those symbols mean. So the arrows on the left of the screen are a rundown of how the movements are going. So you got the movement or a turn or flank. Wherever you see the crossed swords, that's where there was an actual hand-to-hand fight going on with swords and shields and spears and whatever else. The missiles are throwing spears or flinging rocks with a sling or bows and arrows or anything that flies through the air to attack the enemy. And whenever you see the little black explosion with the yellow highlight, that is a unit that gets destroyed. So let's go to the battlefield. So we have set up here, Pompey was to the north and Caesar to the south. Pompey is located right here, and he is in control of this portion of the army. And over here we have Scipio that is in control of this portion of the army. On Caesar's side, we have Caesar in control of this portion of the army with Caesar here. And over here is Mark Antony in control of this portion of the army. So as the battle begins, Caesar was the first to make a move, and he was unable in the game to move forward with his portion of the army, so he had to stand fast. However, Mark Antony, on the other hand, was able to move, and Mark Antony moves his army forward towards Scipio's army. And after they move forward, they fired missiles into that unit of Scipio's army. And this is how they ended up after that movement. From here, Scipio's army and a unit of Pompey's infantry fired missiles into one of Mark Antony's infantry units. This caused the other one of Mark Antony's units to retreat, while the unit that did not fire missiles charged into that first unit of Mark Antony's army. Next after that, the Pompey's cavalry charged into Caesar's cavalry. Caesar's cavalry retreats, and Caesar's infantry moves forward to set a screen, while that first unit of Mark Antony's army is destroyed. And this is how that round ended. In the next round, Caesar's infantry decides to charge and attack Pompey's cavalry, while Mark Antony's infantry units decide to fall back to reconsolidate. From here, both of Pompey's cavalry units were destroyed, and the rest of the infantry moves forward to get online. And this is how that battle round ended. From here, Mark Antony decides to charge with the infantry, and Caesar's army decides to move into a position to take a flank, while Scipio's army charges forward and attacks, and that far right unit of Scipio's army decides to perform a flanking maneuver. Pompey's infantry that's left of his portion of the army decides to move and set up a screen, while Mark Antony's left flank gets destroyed by Scipio. From here, Caesar's infantry decides to fire missiles into that infantry unit of Pompey's that set up the screen, and Pompey's infantry fires missiles back. And this is how that round ended. After this, all of Caesar's infantry decides to reconsolidate with Mark Antony's infantry to just kind of pull together, while Caesar's cavalry charges into Pompey's infantry and gets destroyed, and Scipio's infantry decides to move around so they can get into a better position and fire missiles into all of Caesar's remaining units, which is all infantry at this point. And this is how that ended. From here, Pompey's infantry attacks towards Caesar's infantry, and the Scipio's army begins to square off. Pompey's infantry gets destroyed as they charge into Caesar's infantry, and the remaining units of Scipio's units over there square off, with this one moving out to the flank to replace Pompey's infantry and firing missiles into Caesar's infantry. And this is how that ended. This next round, Caesar's infantry attacks Pompey's infantry, while Scipio's part of the army decides to move forward, or the front portion of the army moves forward to take the flank of Mark Antony's remaining unit. Pompey's unit gets destroyed, but the last unit of Scipio's army moves forward to block off Caesar's infantry. And this is how that round ended. From here, Scipio was able to defeat the remaining unit of Mark Antony's army, and the rest of the army that's with Pompey moves to a position to backfill the unit with Scipio, and to confront Caesar's infantry at this point. However, Caesar's infantry decides to fire missiles into Pompey's infantry. And this is how that ends. At this point, Caesar has to make a decision. Does he charge Scipio's infantry and get flanked by Pompey, or does he charge Pompey's infantry and get flanked by Scipio's infantry? So he has to make a decision, and he chooses to charge into Scipio's unit and get flanked by Pompey. But it pays off for Caesar because he is able to defeat the rest of Scipio's units. And it ends like this. From here, Pompey is able to defeat the large unit to the right of Caesar's army. And that last remaining unit will move forward to face off against the remainder of Pompey's army. And it finishes like this. From here, Caesar's last unit charges into Pompey's infantry and destroys the front unit, and the rear unit decides to retreat, and ending like this. From here, Pompey retreats even further, and Caesar goes after him, and at this point, Caesar wins the battle. So that ends the Battle of Pharsalus. In our game, Caesar actually wins the same as what happens in real life. There was some slight differences. In real life, Caesar had a lot more of his army left, and he was able to go into the camp and find all the senators and either capture or kill them. In this situation, they were pretty even at the end. But Pompey realized that he really didn't have a chance to come back at that point, so he just fled and conceded the victory to Caesar. However, I think that if Pompey would have won, there would have been pretty much the same situation with Pompey instead of Caesar. However, after the battle, Pompey escapes to Egypt, where he is beheaded by the pharaoh. Caesar goes after him and confronts the pharaoh, who is in the middle of a civil war himself with his sister. But Pharaoh tries to get Caesar to join his side, and instead Caesar ends up joining Cleopatra's side, who is the pharaoh's sister, and Cleopatra ends up winning the civil war ultimately. And from that point, Caesar goes back to Rome, and the rest is history. Thank you for watching, and hopefully you learned something. And I want to give a special thanks to Brian Campbell for assisting me with this project. And hope to see you later. Bye.